checking in with you. It is Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone. As always, I'm your host here on the SCR update. And if you can't tell, I am wearing my full Carolina regalia here. I'm in full Gamecock mode today. And why is this appropriate for Halloween? Because I got to tell you, there's nothing more truly haunted and sad than a Gamecock fan. Fans that are doomed to constant soul-crushing disappointment. And I figured that, you know what? What a perfect costume to wear for Halloween. You know, being a Gamecock fan is the ultimate example of a psychologically stigmatized existence in South Carolina. Our program is the same old ghost story told year after year. You know, we're forever chasing the specter of a major championship in football, one that we've never actually won, although, you know, that Black Magic season was so close, so close. I'll always hate Navy as a result. You know, it always, you know, the season always starts off on a high hope and it fades into a familiar, dreaded loss. You know, the chicken curse is always there. This decades-long curse that hangs over our team's head teases us always. We're always at the brink of a massive upset or a big season, only to, you know, commit a crippling penalty or suffer a key injury or fumble the ball in the last couple of minutes. It's that feeling of we almost got it and then it disappears. And worst of all, having to live in the same state with our rival, the Clemson Tigers. That makes it that November game is always a test of our collective pride. It's a, you know, constant, you know, build up, let down. That is the definition of the haunted state of the soul of a true Gamecock fan. Now, why do I mention this today? Well, it's Halloween, of course, and the very ground that we walk on here in South Carolina has a very specific rule that mirrors our our football misfortunes. You don't have to disclose the ghosts unless you are specifically asked. And a stigmatized property is one that buyers might avoid, not because of a physical defect, you know, like a leaky roof, but because of a psychological stigma. That usually means a house where something tragic, criminal, or even just plain creepy has happened, like a murder or suicide, or even reports of a haunting of ghosts. So the core question, the real question for realtors in South Carolina is, do you have to disclose the presence of psychological stigmas? So here's where the law gets a little interesting. And frankly, you know, the law is pretty cold on this topic. In South Carolina, the law provides a significant level of protection to sellers and listing agents from having to disclose a property's stigma. Now, the key section of the code that you have to remember is Title 27. I think it's chapter 50, Section 40. It's also in it's also in Title 47 of our license law. But this statute specifically says that agents and sellers are not liable for failing to disclose certain facts, and that includes the previous occupant's death, whether it was a murder or an unfortunate suicide. If someone died from a disease, such as, well, it could be anything. Diseases are not required to be disclosed. And other psychological stigmas. It doesn't specifically say ghosts, but that certainly is what is implied there. So in short, South Carolina is a buyer beware state when it comes to ghosts. Now, while the law protects a listing agent and the seller from a lawsuit for non-disclosure, savvy professionals, realtors know that full disclosure is often still the best practice. And the reason is simple. What's the buyer going to find out after they move in? Whether it's, on social media or just checking it out on Google or just regular neighborhood gossip. A buyer will likely find out. And imagine, buying a home, closing the deal, and then having a neighbor casually come over with, a bundt cake, welcoming you to the neighborhood and say, "Hey, I'm surprised you were able to get that blood stain, out of the ceiling," or, mention whatever other notorious event may have happened there. Even if the buyer can't sue you for damages, they can complain very loudly, and that can lead to bad reviews, negative testimonials on Zillow or Google, reputational harm. It could result in complaints that are filed with against the broker in charge or with the real estate commission, and certainly it could cause a lot of agent stress, right? A lot of angry phone calls accusing the agent of not providing the full picture here. And even if these complaints, have no basis in the law, the fact that it can harm your professional reputation should be enough of a concern, should be more than enough of a concern to have a conversation with your seller and explain to your seller why it's in their best interest, why it's in your best interest to disclose any possible psychological stigma. Better to know that up front than after the fact. Well, and I guess the follow-up question is, what if the seller says, "No, I don't want you to disclose any of these things"? And at that point, you've got to make a decision, a business decision, whether it's in your best interest as a company to take that listing or not. Remember, you don't have to take every listing that comes your way. And there are, I can imagine there are situations and properties that you're probably better off leaving alone. And so I will let you make that final decision. While the law may give you the right to stay silent, good business sense, reputation management often dictate being proactive and transparent. Just remember, what are the rules of real estate? You've got location, 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 and the number 2 rule for realtors is disclose, disclose, disclose. It's how you keep your reputation clean and your business healthy. So what are our final takeaways here? Number 1, listing agents and sellers have legal protections under South Carolina law, but for the sake of your reputation, your business reputation, consider disclosing the spooky history anyway. And buyers, recommendations for buyers, be your own ghostbuster, ghost hunter. If you're sensitive about that kind of information about a home's history, do your own research and make sure you ask direct, specific questions. Because one thing I didn't mention, the law requires the agent to answer direct questions. So even though they don't have a duty to proactively disclose, if a buyer asks a question, is this property stigmatized, the agent has to answer that question truthfully. So they can't purposefully hide information they know about if they receive a direct question. So remember that. And speaking of sad stories, while the Gamecocks certainly are haunted by past defeats, at least their real estate transactions are legally clear on the disclosure of ghosts. So realtors, thanks again for tuning in. I hope you have a spooky and safe Halloween. Our neighborhood's going to be a madhouse tonight. And I'm going to do what I always do, is I'll have the lights turned off and the sprinklers turned on. Take care, everyone. Be safe and stay realtor strong. We'll see you soon.